Hello, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. The title of this book is actually, in the English translation, When We Cease to Understand the World. It is by Benjamin Labatut, who currently lives in Santiago, Chile. This will be the first of two books that I am definitely reading for Chile, the next being Jose Donoso's Obscene Bird of the Night, but we are starting here. But you may notice that the title of the video is not the same as this title, and that is because the original publication in Spanish was called Un Verdor Terrible. And much like the physicists, the real-life physicists discussed in this book preferred the elegance and simplicity of Schrodinger's wave function to Heisenberg's matrices, I also prefer A Terrible Greening as the title of this book. Even though it sounds a little awkward in English, I prefer the original title in Spanish. However, ceasing to understand the world definitely rings true with something that happened to me as I was reading this book in the Atlanta airport on my way to Peru, and then we eventually went to Easter Island, and that was a great trip and all. Now I'm back in Lima waiting to go back to the United States. But anyway, the story. I'm in the Atlanta airport, probably 50 or 60 people around me. I've never had a moment like this. I was reading the book, I look up, and it doesn't matter what people were doing. Eating, climbing or going up the escalator, laying down, sitting there. Every single person around me had a cell phone in front of their face. Even the person sleeping. The person was sleeping and they had a cell phone propped in front of their face. 50 or 60 people, and I am the only one reading. I'm the only one doing anything that's not looking at a screen at the same time. And now, it could be many of these people had something very important to say or to do on their phone, to tell their mother they were okay, a business thing that's keeping them going. It could be. I'm not judging. I can't judge what these people were actually doing, but when you look around and you see 50, 60 people all on their screen when this just didn't even exist 30 years ago, I mean, I don't know. It was the first time, I've had moments similar to that, but it was the first time that I was just shaking my head. I look back at my book and I don't understand this world. And I feel myself in kind of a place where there were a few other things that happened during vacation that made me realize I'm already losing touch with where technology is going, how businesses are using technology, how people are using technology, and I'm in my mid-30s and I feel like I'm falling behind. So it's like, this is the world, right? And I don't know if that's really what the title is pointing to, but I'll get back to talking about this book. It was a really interesting one. It kind of feels, it feels a little bit above not above, but apart from my ability to say whether it's good or not. I had a conversation with a Peruvian friend of mine who's he graduated in with a literature degree and very knowledgeable, and well, I found this book really interesting. He didn't care for it as much, so we had an interesting conversation about why. And it's just that, yeah, the book lays out facts. It is a book full of actual facts, but then it has certain parts where it goes off into fiction. So it really kind of walks this weird border between nonfiction and fiction. And it's mainly discussing physicists, scientists, and starting with Fritz Haber of Germany, who I remember hearing about on YouTube back in the day. I think maybe it was like a crash course video or something. I don't know. That's just the world I grew up in, I guess, And I remember, it's always stuck in my head how crazy it was that the person responsible for the explosion in the human population and it being sustained and all of the issues and changes that have come with that was somebody who was basically dedicated to making chemical weapons for the Germans in, between World War I and World War II. So this book throws, it starts with that, and then it moves into physics and shows how, like, physics lead not only the creators of their theories into dark places, but also the whole sort of all of us as human beings, you know, getting to the atom bomb and things like that. So it lays out the facts, but then throws in these kind of weird things that didn't actually happen. I mean, in the whole first chapter is pretty much fact, from what I can tell, about Fritz Haber, but then it ends with, among the few possessions Fritz Haber had with him when he died was a letter written to his wife. In it he confessed that he felt an unbearable guilt, not for the part he had played directly or indirectly in the death of untold human beings, but because his method of extracting nitrogen from the air had so altered the natural equilibrium of the planet that he feared the world's future belonged not to mankind but to plants, and as all that was needed was a drop in population to pre-modern levels for just a few decades to allow them to grow without limit, taking advantage of the excess nutrients humanity had bestowed upon them to spread out across the earth and cover it completely, suffocating all forms of life beneath a terrible verdure. And that's the literal translation of the Spanish title, un verdor terrible, or a terrible verdure, terrible greening, however you want to say that. So, again, I don't know if that last part is true, but it doesn't sound true. I didn't actually look it up, because at the end of the day, what I'm reading here is fiction. And I was more concerned with following its themes and what it was trying to say. And, you know, I guess it is reflective. It is reflective of the modern era, isn't it? That truth and falsehood have just become kind of intertwined. We've definitely seen it in the United States politics and elections, for example, where it seems like actual truth doesn't matter anymore. And I said to my Peruvian friend as we were discussing it, like, is it immoral to write a book like this, where, you know, some of this, it kind of presents itself as fact, but then some of it is not? But no, in the end, the responsibility kind of falls on us as the readers and the spectators to try to discern what's true in this world, right? Or, you know, I think it's debatable. So, but the reality is, this isn't the first book of its kind. About 15 or so, maybe less, 10 to 15 years before this was published, there was a Peruvian novelist that he showed me. I'll put the name in the description because I can't remember it off the top of my head, that wrote a book very similar to this. You open it up and it's basically just like history, like facts, but then it interweaves fiction. So this isn't the first time something like this has been tried, but it might be the first time that it's reached an international audience. This Peruvian book that I'm mentioning does not, I believe, have an English translation, but I will mention it because, yeah, my friend who's very well read pulled it out and showed me, hey, this was already done pretty much 10 to 15 years ago. It just never reached an international audience. None of this is like, that doesn't make this book bad or anything. Like, I think it's an interesting book, and again, I think it's kind of beyond my saying if it's good or bad, because what it's doing is so weird, so bizarre, so experimental. But at the same time, it almost feels like we're reaching a limit here. Like, if you go any further beyond this line that he's towing between fact and fiction, it kind of ceases to be fiction. It ceases to be literature. Or, worst case scenario, we cease to even understand what it is. So it's kind of a strange thing. Like, I almost feel like this to me represents not only a point of, like, we can't go beyond this. You can't go beyond this and still call it like fiction or literature. And also, I also get the feeling that, like, the sort of how do I put it? Just sort of the apocalyptic and, well, this gets into a whole conversation of the absolute again, and things that are going in my head that I've talked about before with Ernesto Sabato, Cormac McCarthy, how I see those two authors in their final novels pursuing the absolute, one through the humanities and one through physics. And there are many, even the physicists in here, I think you could argue that that Heisenberg in his matrices was pursuing not just a metaphorical, not just using numbers to represent what was happening. He was seeking to make the numbers represent what was happening in reality at the atomic level. But, you know, Schrodinger could just make that happen with his wave function, and you didn't even have to worry about all these matrices, from what I understand. I'm not really talking about physics here. What I'm talking about is the search for this absolute understanding and connection with the universe, and the absolute, maybe it doesn't even exist. But what I'm trying to get at here is we've seen this pursuit of the absolute end in this sort of apocalyptic despair in a few different ways, in a few different places, and there's no going beyond that. Like, the future, does the future of literature need more of this apocalyptic darkness, even if that is the reality we're living in? Because also what you put into the world and the things you put into people's minds, doesn't that kind of manifest something in reality too? So maybe we need a future where literature can show how people can actually deal with this changing world. I don't know. This is just thoughts, you know. All these videos are just kind of varying degrees and varying qualities of thoughts. Some not so great, some are good, but those are some things this book made me think about. And also, I also mentioned in the last video how Cesar Vallejo, in his poem The Eternal Dice, represents in feeling what is expressed in the uncertainty principle. And also, if you have a negative reaction to the poem, I think is basically how Einstein, according to this book, again, I don't really know what's fact or fiction, and I didn't do a whole lot of looking into what it is. Einstein he rejected sort of the uncertainty principle and said God does not play dice with the universe. But Cesar Vallejo, before any of this, you know, in the early 20th century, wrote a poem that actually expresses its feeling. So if the poet can understand this about the world before even the physicists, what does it tell us about truth? You know, what does it tell us about does it matter what the truth is if we still feel this terrible uncertainty and this feeling of, like, you know, there's all this suffering in the world for no reason, this kind of thing. Anyway, I really recommend you check out Cesar Vallejo's poem, The Eternal Dice, as well as The Black Heralds, which is the work of poetry that's in. And if you want to hear some of that poetry recited in Spanish, you can check out my last video on that, which I'll also link in the description. So that's pretty much all I have to say today about Benjamin Labatut's When We Cease to Understand the World. There's other great videos out there on it. I know Orpheus has one. Definitely check out his channel. His review actually got me interested enough in this book to read it. So I'll probably link that one as well. All right. Take care. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time on Mike Reads the World.